You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow, Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Lexie Elliott on the show with me. She has an amazing new book. It's called How to Kill Your Best Friend. And guys, this is a must read. This you've got to have this sitting next to your comfy reading chair this summer. It's so much fun. You're going to love it. I know you will. Welcome to the show, Lexie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for saying such lovely things.
Oh, you're so welcome. They're very well deserved. Lexie, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, that is an interesting question. Well, I think as soon as I understood that books were written by people and didn't just, spontaneously come into being, then that was what I wanted to do. And I grew up at the foot of the Highlands, very rural part of Scotland, and I went to a primary school. Primary school in Scotland is between the ages of 5 and 12. I went to a very small school that had in total 26 people. So we didn't have, big facilities for library or anything. And
Sure.
What we actually had was a library bus that came round. I can't remember whether it was every week or 2 weeks, but you would get to go into the library bus by yourself and speak with the librarian, and she would help guide you as to what books you wanted. And I just absolutely loved that library bus. And I think, the combination of that and the fact that I was likely to be a strong reader anyway. Books were very much encouraged at home. Really sparked my interest, and I almost don't remember not wanting to be a writer.
I love that. Do you remember if there was a particular book, or maybe it was an author that you fell in love with, or a book series that really let you know that stories could transport you to a new place and another time?
I think, the ones that were really influential to me were more around my teens, when I started reading things like Margaret Atwood and Sherry S. Tepper. Margaret Atwood, just, obviously so iconic. And in particular, her short stories, I believe the book's called The Wilderness Tips, really opened my eyes to, in fact, the literary form of the short story and what you could do with that. And then Sherry S. Tepper's book Grass, which, won a ton of awards, it was so wonderful in terms of, world building within the fantasy genre, but without in any way sacrificing the character development and the arc. And the combination of those two really, really sparked thoughts for me of how you could take writing forward.
I love it. Lexie, as with a lot of writers, there's this early desire to tell stories, and you fall in love with books and stories. And invariably, there's that life gets in the way of your plans to be a writer.
Oh, yes.
And you have to pay bills, and or start a family, or all of the responsibilities that come with being an adult. And writing has a way of coming back around. What was your path like?
Yeah, so at high school, really, I was a good student, and I could have followed the route of doing English at university, but also I was very strong mathematically and was looking at doing physics. And I suppose at that point I felt, that the better route in terms of, being able to have a future profession that would pay the bills the better route was physics, and in fact that's what I did. I went to Oxford University, did a degree in physics, was rather out of my depth to begin with for the first year, I think, until we kind of hit exams and realized I was doing fine. I suffered very much from imposter syndrome, like many people can do.
Oh, sure.
It seems to be particularly strong with women. And then I realized that actually I was doing just fine. And when it got to the point of people starting to apply for jobs, all my friends were going for jobs as like management consultants and investment bankers, and I didn't even know what those professions were. I mean, up in rural Scotland, that was not what people's parents did. I didn't have any access to those kind of career opportunities or understanding even what they were. And I had the opportunity, in fact, my tutors were encouraging me to do a PhD. So I stayed on at Oxford and did a PhD. So I spent 7 years at Oxford, which were wonderful, and I highly recommend to anyone who has the opportunity. And then after I'd done my PhD, that's when I went to work for an investment bank, when I figured out what it was all about by then. So yeah, I was at the bank for a good long while, paying bills, as you say, and I was always writing, generally short stories, some poetry that's probably best kept in a drawer somewhere. And I hadn't quite got round to thinking that I was ready or able to start a novel until I lost my banking job during the global financial crisis, like many people did, and I had some time at home with a young child that became 2 young children, and I thought really hard about what I wanted to do to preserve a bit of me and my dreams and my hopes, and ultimately, although I went back into the city in asset management rather than investment banking, I had started a novel by then, and ultimately my first novel, The French Girl, got published, and now I'm obviously I've just had my 3rd novel published yesterday, and I'm writing my 4th.
The French Girl was your first novel to be published, but was this the first novel that you had written?
No, I did write one before, and I sometimes think that I will, spend some time. I think I could clean it up a bit, maybe mess around with the themes a bit. It's not terrible, but it's definitely a starter novel as it is at the moment. You learn an awful lot, I think, in the first novel that you ever write, and so you should. Writing is a craft, like anything else. It's going to require an awful lot of practice to get better at it.
Sure. I've heard numerous stories from writers about that first novel that's published. Some people take Brandon Sanderson, the acclaimed fantasy writer who was on the show a few years ago, and he wrote something like 13 novels before his first one sold and was eventually published. Other people wrote a novel and just kept working on that one novel for years and years and years until it, got into the shape that they could sell it. As someone who wrote a novel and put that in the desk drawer or the trunk or whatever the analogy we used, and moved on to write The French Girl that did get published and sold at market. What do you think that is about the work itself that gets you to move on to a new story idea or stick with the original story idea to keep working on it? At what point in the process do it's time to move on and try something else?
I think that in that particular case, I felt like it wasn't the writing that was the problem. It was just maybe not a strong enough premise. So in that case, moving on was the obvious thing. And also, I just had a better idea. The French Girl was a better set up altogether and had hooked me into wanting to write it. And in fact, it was something that had been kicking around in my head since my mid-20s. And I think it over time evolved into something that I could really see myself writing properly. I almost don't know why I didn't start with that, but I didn't. And then, of course, there's if you're lucky enough to have good people in your writing life to help you. I have a wonderful agent, Marcy, who is pretty much my first and only reader before publication, obviously, excepting my publishing house, obviously. But Marcy's opinion was really, you should focus on The French Girl. It's a much stronger, better book. Keep going with that.
The French Girl was your first book to publish, and then you followed that up with The Missing Years, and now How to Kill Your Best Friend. You have really carved out a spot for yourself in psychological thrillers and crime thrillers. What was it that originally piqued your interest with this genre and this type of story?
I suppose it's, for me, the thriller aspect, the mystery aspect gives you a really great scaffolding on which to pin everything else that you want to also discuss, because there are inevitably other themes. It's not all about, whodunit. It's clearly about the relationships and the past and the present and the intertwining of people's, small simmering resentments and dashed hopes and so on. And there are different things that you want to explore, but when you have the scaffolding of the mystery within the book, then it's much clearer to be able to do that and keep the pace of the novel moving. I would say that, like most writers, you don't necessarily set out saying, okay, I am going to be, a psychological thriller queen. You set out saying, I'm going to write a book, and then somebody tells you that fits in the psychological thriller category, normally somebody at a publishing house, and then they also want you to continue in that category, which I'm very happy to do. But I also think that at some point I may write in other genres also. I have other stories within me that wouldn't fit into that categorization.
With the French Girl, do you remember what that better premise was when you conceived of that book?
Yeah, I think the French Girl, it really, the thing that perhaps stood out with that was the group of friends. When you look at them 10 years later versus something pivotal that happened, just kind of at the end of their university days, a little bit of a big chill factor to it, I think, that provided a pretty good hook. And then the standout point was, and it's not really a spoiler to say this, that the character who is the French girl who is dead by page 2, she found a way to really make her mark on the manuscript and if you like, build up her part. And I think that really makes it something a little bit different. And I think that's why it, garnered a really good reaction from the publishing houses.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster, to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
Looking for a tool to help you visualize your story before the drafting begins? PlotPens is cloud-based and optimized for any device. There's nothing to download. From the new writer who isn't sure how to tell their story to the veteran who can increase their productivity dramatically, we've had experienced writers lay out a detailed structure for several novels in a series in a matter of a few days. The app takes you through 4 steps of the process: the concept or log line. Make sure you have a solid concept that you can keep coming back to throughout the process. The outline, 12 beats and 3 acts, each has a description of what should be happening with examples. The board, 40 cards. We take the 12 beats and add sub-beats to those, breaking it down even further and being very specific about what should go into each. These also have examples and descriptions. Right. We take those 40 cards and turn them into a to-do list. For a 50,000-word book, it's about 2 cards per chapter roughly. We have a beautiful editor built into the app. You can export your manuscript to a PDF anytime with the click of a button. Let PlotPens help you visualize your writing project. Use code HANK10 to get 10% off PlotPens. PlotPens.com. I like the way that you talked about psychological thrillers a little while ago in saying that they're really stories about other things that we get to talk about. We just couch them in this really page-turning way. This, there's emotional drama that keeps you invested in the story, and that's one of the best ways that I've heard someone talk about psychological thrillers, because I've had people ask me before, well, why do you think I would like this book? And sometimes you kind of, stammer around looking for a way to describe it. But that's really it, is we get to talk about really important interpersonal things and just happen to couch it in a story that keeps us excited, our blood pumping. When you first start conceiving of a book, do you think of the how do I say this? The points that you want to get across, or the emotions that you want to explore, or the relationships that you want to explore? At what point of kind of thinking about the novel before you start writing does the meaning of the book start to seep in?
That's a good question, and I think it probably changes from book to book. On certain books I've had a very firm idea, and on others I've slightly surprised myself. I think the main theme is probably there when I start. So, for example, in The Missing Years, I was really wanting to explore the relationship between 2 sisters who hadn't been brought up together, quite distanced in terms of the age gap, and then also in their experiences of childhood, despite sharing parent. But and then other things start creeping in, and you go, oh, that's interesting. I must have been thinking about that underneath, and I didn't quite realize I was. So yeah, probably the main theme is there, and then other things might start to come in. But I remember, just on this point of you don't always know what you're writing about when you're writing, and then afterwards you go, I get it. I once wrote a short story which was actually a very important short story because it won an award, and that made me think I can really do this, and I could maybe step up to the novel format. And when I started that, I thought I was really just writing about a university experience. And when I finished it, I realized I was writing about the death of my grandfather. So I'd come quite far in that within a short story. But I would never, when I started that, I did not know it was going to be, all tied up with the death of my grandfather.
Lexie, I know that water has been very important to you in your life, and that you have been a swimmer for a long time, played water polo, and all of that. And I know that you didn't come up with the book covers for your books specifically. The most of the time our publishers have people that work on that. But one thing that really intrigued me is The French Girl and How to Kill Your Best Friend both feature water and people swimming prominently on the cover. And I thought that was fascinating. How much does these other aspects of your life that are not writing, swimming, etc., how much do those things seep into the stories that you tell?
Well, I first like to say I'm very glad I'm not the person who develops the covers, because they wouldn't be anywhere near as good as they are. I think Berkeley have an absolutely fantastic art department, and
Sure.
I love what they put together. They do ask for my opinion, so it's quite possible that we end up swaying towards the water because I prefer it. But I think, look, it's hard for any writer to say that their experiences don't seep into novels. Of course they do. We're all writing from what's inside our head and what makes us the people that we are. And clearly How to Kill Your Best Friend is very steeped in chlorine, and much as my life has been, really. And I often write women who are smart, thoughtful, and driven, and they usually are people who think about going to the gym or think about how they keep fit or have some competitive aspect to them somewhere, because that is, the people around me and the friends that I have, we all think that way. And so I guess that comes in there as well. But for How to Kill Your Best Friend, it's a very strong aspect, the open water swimming, and clearly that's something that I didn't need to do too much specific research for, because I guess I've been researching for it for a great deal of my life, and I'm very familiar with that world. And setting is so very important to me, and to feel like I know the setting that I'm writing within. And certainly I had that for the swimming aspects of How to Kill Your Best Friend.
I love talking about the creative process, Lexie. And the point of the creative process that borders the closest to just pure magic is that initial spark of inspiration for a book, and for as many different people as there are writers. The process is that different. No one has a process exactly the same. But at one moment in time, for you, How to Kill Your Best Friend did not exist in any form or fashion. It just didn't exist. And then either a character walked onto the stage of your mind, and then you were intrigued. Well, what is she all about? And and then you start following her. Or maybe you think of a premise. Maybe it's watching a news program, or hearing people talk, overhearing something at a coffee shop, maybe, and then you start playing that what if game, and then those characters come in and inhabit that, and then in some form or fashion, How to Kill Your Best Friend does exist, and then it's your job as the writer to excavate that story and dig it out. And then we're holding this book in our hand. What is that? What was that first moment of inspiration for How to Kill Your Best Friend?
It was actually the title. The title popped into my head when I was searching around for, my next project. I'd just finished The Missing Years, gone through, the copy edit process, and was thinking about what I would turn my hand to next. And that title came into my head, and I just thought, wow, okay, well, why would you even want to do that? And then the storyline started to come out for me, thinking about the friendship groups and so on. And I happened to be on holiday. This was pre-COVID, when everybody could travel so much easier, and I was on holiday somewhere, and that kind of remote island setting was very much presented to me by just where I happened to be when I thought of that title. And so the story unfolded from there, I would say. But yeah, it was the title. And I'm not normally someone who comes up with good titles. The French Girl and The Missing Years were retitled in the process of production of those books, and this one has stuck. Though I'm very pleased to say I have got the title I wanted on the book.
Well, you've got this fascinating cast of characters with Braun and Georgie and Lissa. How did you've got this great title and that sparks all sorts of imagination, but when did these really fully formed characters come in?
Yeah, so pretty soon after the title occurring to me, I started to see Lissa and Georgie, and then Braun arrived soon after that. But what really kind of helped me with Braun was realizing that I needed to have a dual narrative. And I was worried because I hadn't written from two points of view before, and I was worried that I would maybe misweight the book, shall we say. You slant it too much in one or another direction, or have too much sympathy for one or the other. And actually, it wasn't like that at all. And I ended up feeling very, very comfortable with both characters, and understanding them both and loving them both, even though they're very, very different. So yeah, I think it was Lissa and Georgie first, and Braun after.
You have a fascinating narrative style that runs through the book, and the beginning of chapters are this anonymous narrator who's talking to us, and do we trust this narrator? Who is it? What clues can we get from it? How did that decision to work that narrative style come in?
In fact, the first method one at the beginning of the book, that was in fact the first thing I wrote, and it was fun. I just was really enjoying writing that, and so I thought, I'm going to keep this going. And it led to some really entertaining conversations with my children, who would come back from school and say, "Oh, I thought of a new way you can kill someone." And we would have all these. I mean, it's not the normal post-school conversation, but so far they don't appear to need any therapy. They've come up with some really entertaining ideas, some of which made it into the book. But if you're having fun when you're writing, I mean, within reason, because there's always the point where you have to take that step back and really distance yourself and look at it a lot more objectively. But certainly, if you're having fun as opposed to boring yourself when you're writing, then it's much more likely that the reader will be enjoying themselves too.
The other interesting style that you start to realize as the book goes on is that some of the the narratives from different characters sort of blend in and out of each other. And there's this interesting thing that happens where the group collective almost acts as a single character and then back out. And it's this really interesting interplay between, how friendships work and how we become close to one another, and then yet can see the things that separate us. How close do you get to your characters when you're writing them?
Oh, very. I mean, they live inside my head completely. And people ask things like, oh, if they made a movie out of any of your novels, who would play the characters? And I think, well, they are themselves. They're people. I can't imagine anyone else, because they live, breathe, talk. I know what they look like. They're inside my head running around. So yeah, very, very close. But I think the point that you were making about the group collective is kind of an interesting one, because what you can do with a dual narrative is you can put forward different points of view on the same situation, and you can make the reader question, or at least consider a different angle to things. And then of course you've not only got the two narrators, you've got the response from the other characters, and then you start to see that everything can be interpreted in many different ways.
This is such a fascinating book. I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on it. It was so much fun. At the end of the book, when people close that back cover, what do you hope they're left with?
Well, I hope they've really enjoyed it, and I hope they want to read anything else and everything else that I write. But really, I hope they come away feeling a sense of satisfaction, because sometimes people write novels where I feel like their intention is to say at the end, gotcha, to the reader, but it's not a satisfactory read, because it doesn't feel in keeping with the character arcs and the development within the story. It just feels like somebody set out to be able to say gotcha. And I wouldn't do that. I think that the character development is very, very important. And when I'm writing, and part of the writing process for me that I find most enjoyable is when the characters do start to, push things in their own way, because then you're getting a real kind of genuine response of where they would go. And I will never be in a position of making a character do something that feels awkward or not realistic. And so I hope they feel like they've read something that is, literarily well done, and enjoying and has an emotional satisfaction to them.
How to Kill Your Best Friend is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, you can grab it in hardcover or Kindle edition if you want to read on your Kindle, or audiobook. Lexie, have you listened to the audiobook yet?
I have not been able to yet, I'm afraid.
I can't wait to.
I have actually, spoken to the production team, and I've heard some snippets from the people who are doing the reading, so I'm sure it's going to be fun.
Well, I've read the physical arc of it, and I can't wait to hear this acted out by a great narrator. I'm going to pick it up soon and check that out. As we hope all of you listening will. There's going to be links to all those different ways that you can grab it in the show notes of this episode. Lexie, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
So they can go to lexieelliott.com, and they'll be able to see links to my bio and the French Girl and the Missing Years.
Excellent. We'll put links to that in the show notes as well. How to Kill Your Best Friend, available everywhere now. Go grab it today. Either use the links in the show notes or go visit your local bookstore, and let's do good stuff for local bookstores. Lexie, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. Nice to talk with you.
Wargate Books presents Hit and Fade, Forgotten Ruin, Book 2, by Jason Anspach and Nick Cole. Narrated for you by Christopher Ryan Grant. Chapter 1. The army of the dead walked straight into our ambush east of Fortress Hawthorne. That's what the FOB is called now, Fortress Hawthorne. Despite it being officially known as Forward Operating Base Hawthorne, as was originally intended when the 50 detachments of various special operations groups came forward through time from Area 51. A one-way mission to save Western civilization from a rampaging nanoplague destroying the very fabric of said civilization. Apparently, we overshot the temporal insertion point and stuck the landing. Sorta. About 10,000 years too late. Said civilization is now basically something straight out of Tolkien or Dungeons and Dragons, which we've all now gotten a lot more familiar with thanks to our resident expert and fledgling hedge wizard, the infamous PFC Kennedy. But the Rangers just call it the FOB. The first of our explosives to ruin the leading elements of the army of the dead advancing on us, Claymore mines the recaptured forge back at Hawthorne had cranked out in the weeks after we'd retaken it from King Triton, were fired by Ranger Sergeant Kang down there with the scouts and Captain Knifehand's assaulters. It was close to midnight when the front rank of bony warriors, carrying rotting shields and spears, eyes glowing malevolently in the deep night mist, advanced into our ambush, only to get ruined by the daisy-chained claymores' sudden eruption. Above us, a cloud-shrouded moon cast a wan yellow light over the battlefield. The night was hot, and spring was coming on full now. The pilots who'd gotten us here in the grounded C-17 back at Ranger Alamo, using their meteorology skills, had guessed it was going to be a long, hot summer ahead of us, and an early one at that. But there was a cold shiver in the dark on your exposed skin that you couldn't quite explain when you saw the dead advancing rank after rank. The bone warriors, carrying spear and shield. Other, darker creatures barely seen. The lower areas of the earth were graveyard cool and misty, so maybe that was it. Still, the brutal, unrelenting cold of our almost last stand back at Ranger Alamo was gone now. But not the horrors. There wasn't a night that some ranger didn't wake up out of a tormented sleep, breathing heavy, sidearms scanning the dark and looking for orcs and ogres to ventilate. I was sweating in the hour leading up to the attack, despite the night and the mist. Kurtz had us humping hard to get the 240 and all its ammo up to the top of a small hill that overlooked the area where we'd channel the advancing echelons of the Army of the Dead into further fun and games the Rangers had planned at a bend in a riverbed. If the approaching Army of the Dead continued on their current course track, they'd enter it for a brief period. It was decided by the captain we'd kill them there. And I was sweating. Not because of fear. No, not at all. "Firing," whispered Sergeant Kang over the comm as he detonated the mines. And 8 daisy-chained claymores spat thousands of steel balls all across the front line of what even I was still finding it hard to believe I was seeing through my night vision device. Skeletons. Warrior skeletons. Ancient warriors like something out of the Bronze or Iron Ages. Worked breastplates of molded plate or rotting scales. Green and tarnished, stamped with the markings of fabled armies fallen in battles long, long ago. Leather cuirasses on some, rotting boots, helms with broken horns, missing teeth, tattered leather kilts, beads and charms dangling from bone wrists, enigmatic holy signs and primal torques black with grave dirt, or from a funeral pyre long ago on some forgotten battlefield far from here, draped about the spine where the throat should be. where it rises to connect to a bone-white skull that seems filled with malevolent purpose and diabolical intelligence. Malignantly so. Walking skeletons like something out of a Ray Harryhausen clay model Sinbad epic from the 1960s. Above, the sliver of moon gave enough light to strengthen our NVGs, making the night vision devices perform exceptionally well as we sprang our trap and watched the advancing elements get rocked by our initial high-explosive opening bid in the game we were about to play. The air was still and hot in the moments before the fight began as we lay there in the tall, sharp grass, waiting for it all to go down. I was thinking a hot cup of coffee would be nice about now, except my canteen only had cold coffee I'd brewed during the long, silent, and windy afternoon of preparation. Still, I was happy knowing I had some, rather than none.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started.